Welcome to another episode of On Point Podcast and More, where sharing is unlimited. I'm your host, Helen Baskerville Dukes, and today my guest is the one and only Dwayne Keys, Managing Director of D Key Solution. Welcome, Dwayne. Hey.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here because, we've been rocking since, 2014, 2015. It's maybe a little
sooner.
Yeah. And one of the things that we do share in common is the economic situation of the community. And I'm so glad you're here because, of course, we need people to be able to speak the truths and also with some facts, some statistics, so that our people can be informed and make better decisions, especially for our future generation, our kids. So let's just jump in. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. What are the areas of economic justice that you've focused on?
So over my, 20-year career of being in financial services, yes, I started out, in banking and investments, and how do we, as particularly Black people, have access to the opportunities so that we can own our own home, own small businesses, be fully employed, and have the higher incomes that we have seen and heard about for all these years, have security with retirement, with passing down wealth in terms of estate planning. So all these aspects of personal and business financial life that we've heard about, that has been my focus. I would say initially working in financial services or for-profit financial services, my focus, I kind of adopted what I now know to be the white mentality of this is how we're supposed to conform to that level. We're supposed to do these things.
But it doesn't work for our community.
So
I'm sorry.
In evolving and in learning with that, and obviously with now being with, in addition to D Key Solution, which I do as the part-time self-employment work, full-time I work for a nonprofit called Compass Working Capital, which specializes in providing asset building programs to families with low incomes who are living in subsidized housing, and we primarily focus on Black and Latina women-led households. My learning and understanding has evolved with time, and so there's a history that because we're living the oppression, it's hard to then talk about what the oppression was when we're still going through
You're like, wait, we're in it. What are you talking about? This is like now.
Exactly. And so with me learning and understanding, it's interesting working in the banking industry, I heard about redlining, but it wasn't until being at Compass that you really see, here's how this policy was infused, not just with housing, but all these other different aspects of life that we know it, and how our wealth was also taken and seized from us in many cases.
Give us an example.
Well, we have in Providence the I-195 land. So if anyone knows or has heard of the redlining map of Providence, I say Google that, you'll see map. Oh yeah, from 1935.
Wow.
And if you'll see, there's there's going to be some green spots. That was what was called primary real estate. That was where predominantly all white people lived. Then there were some sections that were blue.
Was this a part of urban renewal?
No, this was before. Even before. We've had this oppression going on, and this was the oppression that went on during the New Deal of the 1930s. So when you hear of that, what was happening that was benefiting, if you were primarily white male, you benefited.
Wow.
But in many cases, those policies were set up by those who drove the policies to exclude Black and brown people so that they would not benefit. And so with the redlining map, you have those key red areas on that map. Today, you now know those where I-95 goes, where the mall is. Right. And then you have the I-195 land, in which that was land where I-195 used to be. And when they dismantled and rerouted I-195 in the late 2000s, early 2010s, that land owned by the state of Rhode Island now became prime real estate for development. And so we also have to go back to, well, how did that happen? Well, that land, which was designated redlining, which was considered hazardous, they valued that land at a lower value. And then fast forward to urban renewal, then yes, they use that same map to determine where they should place the highway. And then placing the highway,
which are generally in minority neighborhoods.
Correct. And so, yes, they took what they had valued to be lower in land, low value land, based on their assessment, not on true value, based on what they wanted to pay for it. And then they used tools such as offering prices at lower than what the value was at that time, plus eminent domain to seize that land, to displace the residents who lived in those areas, predominantly Black and brown communities, low income ethnic whites too. And then they were able to then have that as a 95 land. But if you now see, that land has become so valued and marketable and high income. So it's interesting how when it was in our hands, the Black and brown people,
it was worth nothing.
But now it's in white hands. Well, you know what? Ooh.
Interesting.
So I think that's part of where, as I understood and started to look at, well, no, it's not just a simple, we need to pull ourselves from our bootstraps. It's, wait a minute, you need to give us the money that you took, plus lost interest and compounding.
Right.
And then at the same time, you need to change how you've been doing things so that all of us have that opportunity. So then, yes, there's still an aspect of choice. I may not want to engage or go down that pathway, but you should not also be doing things, but policies, procedures, or just habit in a way in which it still excludes people.
Right.
So
that was a lot to digest.
Well,
I'm telling you, because it's hurtful.
Yeah.
Because we see the state. We are in the state of being when we talk about our people, rather it's us or once removed or twice removed. And then we try to figure out what.
So for me, I take it as, oh, now I know what we need to do. Because for the years I was struggling like you, like, wait a minute, what do we have to do to get more people to be owning homes or to have their own business or to get ahead? And why, wait a minute, how did that person get hired out of state? I got these qualifications. I've been here all this time. What are they doing? And then part of me was like, well, no. The system is designed and set up that way to exclude people, in particularly Black and brown. And yes, even though the primary driver is not openly or overt excluding Black people, there is the covert racism. There's the undertones. There's a little underbelly. There's the, we tried that in the past. Or, well, wait a minute, it didn't work because we had this incident in which such and such happened. And so we're using one or two minor excuses to justify a full blanket exclusion or declining opportunity for folks to advance. So when I think of economic life or economic justice, I now no longer limit myself to just, these one things. I'm looking at with a lens of everything.
Right. Everything.
And so all those things that connect to economic justice, whether it's education, transportation, healthcare, I do have a lens with that environment. Because it does have an impact on a person's earning ability, for them to be able to advance, for them to achieve economic security. So I look at it all with that lens, and then I stay focused in the lane of, well, wait a minute, where are we at with home ownership, with housing, with people owning their own business, or folks advancing when it comes to workforce, or just having assets. So we can talk about increasing incomes. And I know Providence Business News did an article on chasing wealth, which focused on income, which I shared with you. And hopefully you'll share with your listeners.
Yes, absolutely.
At the same time, that's one part of it. I can have all the income in the world, but if I don't have the savings to take care of that emergency, I am still going to be in a cycle of debt and struggle.
Living from paycheck to paycheck.
There you go. And so, forget retirement or forget, oh my goodness, if I have children, I can pay for college. Wait a minute, I don't have enough to even pay for the food, or I just have enough where I pay for everything. No money to put away for savings for any of those things.
Right. That was a mouthful. So I'm going to move on to the next question and possibly have you on again, just because it's going to take more than one time to get all this information out and for it to have the impact it needs to have.
Yes.
And I know you're out here doing the work. on all these conference calls, Zoom calls, FaceTimes. I don't know what you want to call it, but I know you're there because some of my counterparts, they tell me, oh, you know Dwayne Keys? I'm like, yes, I do. Oh, he was on the call. I'm just like, oh, comes with the fire. Like, so, and I thank you because what a lot of people who probably do not know you know that you do put in the work for sure. You're out here making sure you're advancing the community and making sure that no stones go unturned.
Correct.
How's that?
Yes.
Okay, let's go into okay. So, what is economic mobility?
So, this is a intentional, proactive approach to helping families rise up out of poverty, to increase their incomes when it makes sense. And to have an opportunity to participate in this American dream that they have set up for us, but do it in a way where it is closing those racial and gender wealth divides, and do it in a way where it is helpful to the participant. As I just talked about in the beginning of the program, it's been looked at as a top-down approach, or you just need to do these things when that doesn't work for our communities.
Exactly.
That approach is not what works for us, what is helpful to us, and it also doesn't address the other underlying issues that contributed to why we are in the economic circumstances that we're at. And so that approach is thinking about it from a term of success of what does financial security mean to them? Asking our communities what they want, and then how would it work to deliver that in a way that's helpful to them? Not we take our approach of what we've done elsewhere, but how do we adjust, be flexible, be nimble, and do it in a way in which that community finds it helpful, and then also being honest about the circumstances that we're in. So how do we address certain things when there's other underlying factors that are impacting us being able to advance economically? Being honest, recognizing that, and if not us trying to solve it ourselves, connecting with other particular resources that can support and close those divides as well.
Now, is this Compass or is this the key solution?
Oh, and they're just one of the many options, because when I think of what I now know, when you think of economic mobility, there is the housing piece. You got to secure the housing, but then there's the piece where we also have to have the decent paying jobs. And then if we don't have the skill sets or the education for those other jobs that are much more higher paying, how do we connect folks to those resources where they can obtain that certification, the education at little to no cost? If there's an issue of transportation, what do we do to support that? Because that's very big in Rhode Island. What do we do in terms of if there's a scenario, I've seen this where a lot of working parents, their children have health ailments because of environmental issues. What do we do to support them so that they can work and that their children receive the care and attention that is still needed while they're also earning a living? So
it's a full circle approach.
It is a full circle approach. It is not a one side, one thing and done. And that has been part of my frustration. I've had it over the years where this is nice that you took care of the housing, but we have an education situation going on in Providence. You got to deal with that. But then we got a transportation issue.
And then you have gentrification, and then rent, which is unaffordable, and then lack of housing. So even if I wanted to purchase a house, where am I going to buy it from? I mean, it all goes hand in hand. Now we get the food. I'm unhealthy because this is all I can afford to eat.
And then heaven forbid, if I do want to go work, and I have children, child care, which is a mortgage payment, a rent payment in itself.
And a car payment, because car payments are also, I mean, wow.
And if you do have a car, you live in Providence, your insurance rate.
Astronomical.
There you go. So you have all these factors encircling and challenging you to want to be able to advance. And then you talked about the gentrification displacement, because here's what I also have to say, and someone whose income is a Boston-based salary, I see it now. So as someone who lives here, who's always been here, but now has a Boston-based salary, my income has increased tremendously. So these costs, which are high in Rhode Island, yet because of the income, don't see so high.
Right.
So when you have folks from other areas who do have the incomes coming in and they're moving and paying these rents, buying these properties, that excludes you even further.
Right.
It increases the demand further, which then increases the price.
Exactly, because they'll come in and say, well, I know the house is $400,000, but I'll give you $415
in cash.
Exactly.
In cash. And so my FHA mortgage approval ain't cutting it.
Right. That I've gone through all these classes to improve my credit score and to be able to, be able to pull out a decent loan amount, and I can't.
Correct.
And then with rent. Because one of the other things we don't talk about when it comes to renting, a lot of times, especially in gentrified areas, they don't want to rent to Black people. And so, I mean, the truth, I'm just letting the truth be told. We have so many issues over here on the east side, where people are looking for housing, but, once they see you, oh, sorry, we're all set. The house is rented, and why am I here? Like, make it make sense.
Why is that advertisement still up for renters if you're all set? And so I think part of, again, going back to what I said before, we're so caught up in the issue of dealing with the oppression at the moment. It's hard to take the step back to say, wait a minute, we should find a way to do a study and see if that's actually true, like they used to do in the 1970s, with testing out these fair housing laws.
I agree.
And seeing if that is still in effect, because what has happened is that it's still here. The Jim Crow and the segregation and the redlining is still here. It's being done by a different name.
Right.
And it's done in a way which it has what's called a disparate impact, meaning the issue at hand, although you have like what's called a race neutral policy, is still having the impact of excluding the Black and brown folks.
Right. Especially if you want to talk about what is your credit score looks like.
Correct.
Just because my credit score is bad doesn't mean I don't have money to pay for rent, because I have to have money to live somewhere.
And then that's a whole concept in itself, because here's the thing. When we talk about credit scores or FICO scores, it is created by a private company. It is not a national organization. It's government regulated, but it is not government owned. So there's private companies, consumer agencies, and you can find this information out on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There's all sorts of consumer reports on you, everything from your credit score to check systems. If you want to open up a bank account, if you owe money to another bank or financial institution, to even there are consumer reports on your history of renting.
Wow.
So people in general, but us as Black people need to understand, wait a minute, where are you deriving that information from? Can I get a copy of what you got that you made a decision on? Most folks, because they do not know that that is a consumer right, they're caught up and they told me that I didn't qualify. And so here I am, if you're coming to me, Dwayne Keys, as an accredited financial counselor with Compass, wait a minute, can you tell me what they said? Who's they? And then I'm going into, let's get the details, let's get the facts. What report did they reference? And then how do I support that person in asking those questions and advocating for themselves to find out what was used in that decision? And then if it's found that that was unlawful or unjust, what are the next steps to take with addressing that situation? Because we, for a variety of reasons, we're not going to don't do that consistently, or do it, or we don't do it consistently, we still have these continuous patterns and behaviors. And then also, you see from the financial services industry, they get defensive about these things that we say people are using credit reports and credit scores to disenfranchise folks, and they get very defensive. That's not what we do. That's not how our system works. And what I have to remind them is that it's not you, it's other parties who are using your tools and systems to do that harm and do that injustice and exclude. And when that sets up, it's like, oh, I said, yeah, so you have to be open that, no, it's not necessarily you, but your product service is being utilized in that way. So then what is it?
And they become the scapegoat.
There you go. So then the challenge with them is, wait a minute, now that you hear this and now you know this and we're bringing examples to you, what things can you do within how people use your product or service?
Right.
As well as then how do we change policy, rules, regulations, update things, because what the rule or what was happening 10 years ago is not necessarily the case here. So part of our justice system is that it's hard to keep up when the injustice is recycled and appears in a different form.
Right. because we're still battling the previous systems. And then another one is built, and it's like, oh wow, this too. Yeah, like it's exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, you hear like there was this Urban League article from years ago. There's Jim Crow, and then there's Jimmy Crow, and Jimmy Crow is a different form. It's the modern form, which it's not like Jim Crow out in your face.
James Crow. You're like, oh, it's the formal one now.
Yeah, Jimmy Crow. Now we have James Crow.
Right, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's just new generation.
Wow. So what are some of the things that the city of Providence and the state of Rhode Island can do to improve the economic conditions of Black people?
So for the city of Providence, one thing that they can do is actually follow the city ordinance they have on First Source when it comes to employment opportunities. So the city ordinance, which was passed about 20 years ago, but the city, in terms of the executive branch, I want to be very clear which branch of government. So let's make sure everyone knows there's the legislative branch, city council, there's the executive branch, the mayor's office, and then there's the judicial branch, the courts, the this municipal court. Right. Okay. So when I say the city, I want to be very clear. In this case, I'm talking about the executive branch of the city is not enforcing this city law, in which any entity that receives a sort of public benefit, if you will, whether it's tax credits, whether it's tax stabilization, or if they receive funding even through federal channels. So if there's money from the federal government, such as HUD, that goes through the city, and you obtain that federal funding through the city, you are subjected to this ordinance, in which you have to be proactive for sourcing out and potential employees for your business from Providence residents.
So that's not happening.
That is not happening.
What is the percentage?
That's a great question. I wouldn't know, because the records are not very clear on what is the percentage that the city is sourcing or what they're doing.
Sounds like an amendment, but I didn't know this.
So there have been attempts at enforcement. There was an attempt. There actually was a lawsuit years ago that was successful in terms of the city having to comply with its own local ordinance. Still has not happened. There were attempts to do another lawsuit with the city in 2015, 2016. But the then executive branch representative, the mayor at that time, basically begged those to not go move forward with that lawsuit, and that they would take action to close that gap. That did not happen. I do know that the legislative branch for the city of Providence is looking into what things can be done with strengthening that local law with First Source.
Just do what it's supposed to do, what it says.
Well, here's the thing again. Legislative branch makes the laws. Executive branch enforces the law. So the legislative branch did make that law. But if the executive branch is not enforcing it, then the legislative branch has to find another way in which they can make the law that can be enforced. That's where we're at.
All right. I'm like, just follow the law. Like, come on.
Well, and I think this is the issue. In so many ways, it is complicated, but in so many ways, it is simple. So I've gotten to the point where I have discussions with folks like, it's come down to an issue. Is this that you can't do, or is that you don't want to? And if you don't want to, just say that. I can deal with that. I'm not saying you'll get support in the next election or anything else. You may have some folks who are become opposition. However, stand in your position if that's the case. But if you can see like, all right, that's not going to work, be honest and say, look, we need other things to do. Like, be honest with the circumstances. If you can't, say why you can't, but then at least be willing to be like, I'm willing to try something to make that, close that gap. But if you're like, look, I disagree, I don't want to do that, say that too.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's some lobbying going on, because a lot of the companies that do work here in Providence are obviously outside of Providence, and I can name a few other areas, and those are the same areas that don't care too much for Providence in terms of the population.
Correct.
And then those same counties are the same ones that say, oh, why aren't they doing anything?
Yeah.
Well, we can't get those jobs because you have them.
Correct.
So what do you want me to do?
You had them. You had the inside information. It wasn't open to us. And then that's another thing where you'll hear government say, well, we put out an announcement. You sure did. But did you do it in a way in which it was going to reach all those communities? Or did you do it in a certain way, which because of how oppression has worked, a certain segment of the population is only going to be notified through that outlet. So did you try other outlets and means to reach as many parties as possible?
Right. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But this is good to know. I did not know that the city of Providence was supposed to make sure they have, be intentional about getting Providence residents.
Yeah. I mean, even we think of like our public benefit system, many people don't realize that our state sets those income limits and standards. The federal government has their bare minimum, but then a state, as long as within certain aspects of law, can come up with their own requirements. So then we're looking at SNAP benefits or the requirements to obtain other public benefits. It's actually Rhode Island, our Department of Human Services, via our executive branch of state government, the governor's office, and it also works with our legislator, the General Assembly, to set, modify, and change those limits, those standards. So in many cases, a lot of what change needs to happen is actually within our control locally and statewide.
Well, then people need to be mobilized to push for things that are necessary for the community and stop sitting by. And I don't want to say it like that. We just don't know.
I think that's the main thing.
Just don't know. And then, again, it becomes exhausting because it's like it's like 5 or 6 things at one time. And here we are trying to live. You got children. You know what I'm saying? Some people going back to school, Oh, I'm sorry. Was I too far away?
There are many ways in which we can mobilize that don't require we have to be in person. I think that is a fallacy that is used by certain elected officials in particular to justify, like, see, I got the numbers, I got the support. There's many people who don't go to those meetings, but they do vote. There's many people who are aware they don't go to those meetings. So there's other ways in which we as a community do network, we connect, and we share information that we just need to find other ways that, okay, now that you know this, what are some ways that you can do that you can then you can move forward with advocating, mobilizing in a way that does meet your schedule,
right? That
does fulfill your participation.
Making a phone call,
sending an email.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean, one of the things that was very good when my advocacy is that when there was this meeting that we needed folks to attend, I sent a text message with a picture of the image of the flyer for the meeting. That text message was shared by how many folks twofold? Think about it. Something that's actually not set in stone. Like, you have to send this text, but yet it is that power right there that we have where everyone was aware. Oh, I can go. I can't go. Oh, so I can't go, but so can go.
Right.
That's the way that we can navigate and move forward with these things. And then if you couldn't go, well, what can I do? Phone call, email, talk to this person, let this person know. Do you know so-and-so here? Do you know that person? You may not be able to mobilize yourself, but you can certainly connect with other folks who live in those communities so they know what's going on, and they may be able to harm. So again, we're sharing information, we're making a decision, and if we make decisions to oppose or support, then
at least we're informed.
We're informed. Here we go.
About mobilizing people. So using those avenues.
Yeah, and not being dictated to or thinking we have to do mobilization in a certain way.
Right, for it to be effective.
Correct. When there's many different ways
be heard.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And that's one of my things here is just making sure that people are informed, especially the Black community, and just through many mechanisms, rather it's you coming on or somebody else coming on, but those things that matter to our community and constantly hearing them and seeing that, hey, we're in your corner. These are some of the ways that we can galvanize support and make change, or have a decision, or an informed decision.
Correct. Correct.
And
I think within that too, when we do get that information, we have the right to change our mind.
We really do.
I think part of what happens is we may base a decision or our perspective on limited information, but once we find out the details, well, I hadn't had full information. Now that I do, I have a right to change my mind.
And be okay with it.
Correct. And then others need to respect that, even if you don't like it. So whether it's other people in the community, the elected officials, whoever it is, once they find out the details, you need to respect that is their perspective and they have a right to it. If we're talking about full inclusion in life as we know it.
And no one owes you a reason.
Correct.
For real. But I did. So there was this elected official. He asked for my support, and I was like, yeah, sure. And then I found out somebody else was running that I supported more because I knew the platform. But what I did is told the first guy that I was going to support, I said, I'm sorry, I can no longer support you because I'm going to support this guy. And here are the reasons. I just did it out of respect. I didn't have to. Yeah. And he was like, I respect that. Right. Yeah. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah. You know, and here we are. So I get it. And that makes so much sense. And I'm glad you said that, you know, as a people, we're very loyal. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, we have that right and we should utilize it. Mm-hmm. And we owe no one an apology. Yeah. Or a reason if we don't choose to.
Correct. Absolutely.
All right. So what current issues should people pay attention to as it relates to economic justice in Rhode Island?
So I'll start off with Providence. The one main thing is we're in the process of updating our comprehensive plan. Mm-hmm. So that is the city's plan for the next 10 years in which they're looking at, and that informs how we do zoning, how we do planning, how do we look at the environment, our built environment, as well as economic development for the city. Right. So we're in a process where that is going through evaluation through the City Plan Commission and the future, ultimately the City Council to review, decide, and if it's approved, then it goes for the mayor for his signature. Right. That is one plan that will decide like what will be developed, where in the city, for our resources, where that will be a focus for. And it is one in which we need to make sure that residents are aware of what's being decided because they will reference this document between now and 2034 in terms of why we are heading into particular directions that we're in.
Right. And I think this administration with that piece, with the with this report, or you know, for the next 10 years, what their plans are, you know, trying to make sure the communities had access to it and the say so. Yeah. Because I've been contacted a few others have, and they've had meetings in different communities. So I just hope we had some input. I know I had some input. Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that I definitely think we need to be paying attention to is that when it comes to particularly the city of Providence, these tax stabilization agreements. What's being decided, because we do, as part of encouraging development, we are saying to developers, well, you don't have to pay what be your full share of property taxes for a certain amount of time. But one of the things that you look at is that when you give this tax stabilization agreement, we're saying you ain't got to pay us that money that normally, rightfully so, you would have to pay. So I'm giving you a discount. I'm giving you a loan or forgiveness on your tax that you would have to pay if you were to build this structure, because I understand your structure may not be complete or ready to go for full occupancy. So for X amount of time of this agreement, you don't have to worry about paying a tax at all, or you don't have to pay what would be the full assessed value. Yet, what is supposed to be understood, and it goes back to first source, in order for you doing that, here's what we should be receiving. And so when you think about these tax stabilization agreements, for what we said, hold off, you don't have to worry about paying that tax, are the benefits to the city of Providence when we think of the whole entire city, all of the majority of our residents, is that resonating in terms of the benefits being shared by all of us?
Right, and those are contingencies, but answer me this if you do know. Say we'll hold off on your taxes because, again, we know this might not happen or you have full occupancy. Mm-hmm. But what happens when they do?
Correct.
So there's no, just in case you do, this will be that.
And then that goes back into enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, well, one, are the terms and conditions of the agreement so in which it's very clear that they have to do these things that are supposed to be benefiting the city. That's number one. Because then if it's not in their terms and conditions of the agreement, I can't be mad at them. I got to be mad at those who agreed to that agreement on our behalf. Right. But if it is, and then you're not holding them accountable to that, then yes, I got to look at who's the group who's supposed to enforce those terms and conditions.
That was a lot. No, and you put in the work because but thank you, Dwayne.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I know it feels depressing. I am actually energized and mobilized because it's kind of like here's the blueprint. Here's the options. Are you willing to try and test something out, or are you wanting to just see if what you've been doing, which has not been successful, will possibly be successful in the future?
Well, I guess I have this question because, sometimes when I look at situations and the situation stays the same, I think of it as a child. You have to keep going over, oh, you can do it, you could do it, you could do it. Here are the steps, to crawl. Here are the steps to walk. Here are the steps to run, and that's how I see the situation. So just because people are hearing it and they might feel optimistic for a second because it's like, oh, okay, there's a way. Yeah. But then the steps that have to be taken. So what are some steps to take to become more informed? Or like you said in the very beginning about making sure you have income to live and be comfortable and to be able to access, these things that, we've been trying to access, but for whatever reason, I can't.
One of the things I've been talking about is what are the income supports? I wanted to bring up that new name because to say, oh, public benefits, oh, let me sign you up for SNAP and everything else. Yeah, that's one option. But at the end of the day, and I've said this, I hear with this funding, like, oh, we got X amount of funding to help with small businesses. We got X amount of funding with home ownership, this and that. And then that money's being used to prop up or sustain so-called organizations, nonprofit with their staffing to move things forward. And I'm not saying that's not important, but at the end of the day, people just need cash. They need the capital. And we should not be putting recommendations. One of the things I really get upset about is when I hear, oh, we're going to do financial literacy. First of all, people are literate. They may not know a particular topic or subject, but we should not say, oh, they need to be financially literate. No, they need financial education and they need to know the details that or may be more aware of. But at the end of the day, telling someone, oh, they get to do their budget, or oh, they get to do this, they already know how to budget. If their issue is income, give them the money.
Right, I agree with that.
Stop doing this. Oh, you need to show that you're worthy or justified. And then I always make this statement: is that what they asked the white men in the 1930s during the Great Depression? No. Here's the money. Here's the opportunity.
Right, when they gave them land, they gave them houses. They built colleges. They gave all these things.
So you weren't asking all those questions. No. Then you don't need to be. You should have never asked those questions or did exclusion back then, because that's what happened with the black and brown folks. But then more importantly, if it was okay back then and just give them the money, let them know they'll do what they need to do, that same attitude needs to be happening right now.
Well, it's funny you said that because when you kind of almost touched on reparations,
yes,
that was the thing. Like, when we did have that discussion here a few years ago, the question was, well, we can't just give you money. Like, who are you to tell me what you can't give me when everything that you have was based on me?
One of the things that came out as a class project, but I was very insistent about this, when they were saying like the I-195 land and that they were delving out parcels, and there was a woman who showed up in an event, I forgot her name, she said she was going to sue the federal government for the extraction, them taking the land from her parents or family. I said, it'd be funny. Let's do an assessment of what that value of that land is now. And then let's cross-reference a maps of like, what were the properties, parcels, who owned them. Let's see what the value of that parcel on that land is today.
Right. And the generational wealth you lost.
And then you can easily do a calculation of lost interest on compounding. When you talk about growth, to see what is really owed to those families right there. I said, that's really the reparations I would love to see. And then you hand out that check. And so when we think of like Brown University giving the city of Providence in 2021, the $5 million they promised in 2005, my answer was, well, yeah, that is in 2005 dollars. Things have changed. And so what you owe really is not that $5,000 that you promised back then. It's a lot more.
Right.
So it's those types of things where we're thinking about wealth and calculation, not just that value at that moment in time. What is that value today?
Yeah. I don't know. There's just so much to unpack with this, and just trying to help our community get on our toes.
Yeah.
And with that. this is why I am intentional about supporting Black businesses, because I know the necessity, and I know how the things that we do has been devalued on purpose. Yeah. So we don't even find value in supporting us, or that same particular thing, or the standard is way much higher when it comes to us.
Yes.
So I thank you, and let's just discuss how what the next steps are. Get you back on here, and we just work from there.
Absolutely. I mean, there's aspects like, so there's short term, there's intermediary, and there's long term. And so when you think about this, don't worry about, oh my God, we got to do all this stuff all at once. No.
You can't.
You can't. But there are some things we can do between now and the end of this year, things we can focus on 2025, things that we can look at. What does 2030 look like? Let's take the next 5-6 years or so.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Thank you, Dwayne, and I appreciate you so much. Again, what I said earlier about the hard work you do put in. You're very educated in this area. You have your 20 years of experience. And I know that our community needs to hear it. It's a lot to understand. It's a lot to process. But the more we talk about it, and people take bits and pieces, the more they become educated. And you got to start somewhere so that.
Absolutely.
We can be in a better place, because again, one of the things I had said a few months ago is that we're going to have to save each other. There's no other way, because no one's coming to save us.
Correct.
But here we are.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dwayne. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of On Point Podcast and More, where sharing is unlimited. Until next time, peace.